Okay, now it's recording. And I'm having difficulty getting it posted on our website. So as soon as it's posted, I'll notify everybody by email that it is posted, as well as this session too after the fact. But I'm checking spam more often than I'm checking my regular email now, just to make sure I don't miss anybody. Another issue I'd like to address is that the session ran longer than was advertised, but Dr. Balazs has so many interesting things and important things to tell you that most of you remained in the webinar until the very end. I will tell you that today it will also run longer than planned, again, because of the important things Dr. Balazs wants to share with you. And questions you submit will be answered at the end of the presentation. All PowerPoints from all speakers for all of sessions will be mailed to you at the end of the series. So everybody should be muted so you can move around and make noise during the presentation. I'll mute myself in a minute as well. If you don't know how to mute, at the top of your picture, there is a mute button, and then you can unmute if you want to answer a question. To ask questions, most of you already know this, but you go down to the chat button at the very bottom of your screen and just type your question in, and then I'll be monitoring those and we'll ask Dr. Balazs at the end. Okay, then I told you I'll be sending you all the PowerPoints from all the presentations, resource materials from all of our sponsors, some goodies and information from the Office of Elder Affairs. And if you don't give your complete name and address at registration, I can't send them to you. Some people just put their first name. Some people didn't put their address at all. I have everybody's phone number. But if you will go back and check your registration, make sure you sent me all the information so I can get those packets to you at the end. Now onto our program. Dr. Balazs has extensive experience working with Kupuna and dementia, and she will tell you a bit more about herself, but her personal experience as well as professional provides a wealth of knowledge that she will share with you. Enjoy the session. Dr. Balazs?
Thank you, Kathy. So first, before I start off, I just want to say thank you to Kathy for putting this together. She's amazing. She didn't do herself justice by her own introduction. Believe me, she has a lot of background in this area and just taking care of Kupuna for a very long time. So if anybody has their loved one at her ADC, they're in good hands. That's what I have to say. And she's been one of, well, since the first time we met, it's been a wonderful friendship and growing. She's also like a mentor to me for different things that I'm doing in my career right now. But I acknowledge Deborah. Deborah, I did see your comment in the chat, and we will discuss that a little bit. Hey Pua and Kikumu, they're back, so it's good to see them. But we will, and please feel free to put your, like Kathy said, your questions in the chat, and then we'll get to them at the end. I will answer them at the end, but like I was saying earlier, it is interactive, so there will be time for you to put your responses in the chat. So a little bit about myself. If you were here last time, sorry that it's redundant. Like Kathy mentioned, I'm both family and professional caregiver, which for me, I see it as a blessing. I get to, see both worlds. So I take care of my father, who's in the end stages of Alzheimer's at this time. I care for him at home. It's been a little over 10 years now. So my father is, nonverbal. He can't talk, he can't speak, he can't move himself. But we care for him at home. I have a very small knit of family that helped me, as well as some of my, and then we have a paid caregiver too. Professionally, a little bit, so I'm one of the doctors at Kalihi Valley. It is one of the health centers here on the island. We take care of the 96819 area. I'm the PKD side, the GRACE project coordinator. And what the GRACE project is that we take all of our services from the clinic straight into the Kupuna's home so that we can manage them in home, increase quality of life, extend the time before placement. We're trying to help them age in place. So we do all our service connectivity there. And Ratika, who's joined us today, is social worker for Aloha Care, and she's my partner in crime for this entire program. At the same time, I'm the director of nursing at Lunalilo Home. And so that's my staff that are joining us this morning also. And then I'm also assistant professor at Chaminade University, where I teach geriatrics and health promotion. So that's just a little bit about me. Other than that, I sit on quite a few boards, many of them alongside with Kathy. and involved in a lot of community initiatives. We'll speak to you a little bit longer to the Dealing with Dementia series, which is a great program, came out Rosencart Institute for professional and family caregivers. It's a 4-hour class. So at the end, I'll mention a little bit more. You can let us know if you would like to do that. We also out of Rosencart Institute have the REACH trainer, which we're a part of. Sorry. And then we have, and then I'm part of the I teach Savvy also in the community, 6-week course that really teaches you how to kind of be a caregiver. And then Kathy and I are part of the Caregiver Foundation, Hawaii Pacific Gerontological Society, and I am very much invested with the Alzheimer's Association Aloha chapter and do a lot of advocacy policy for them as well as their vice chair. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. That's all I got. There's probably more to say, but if you guys have any more questions about that, you can put it in the chat or ask me. And now I am going to switch my screen so I can see what I'm showing you. Okay, so I chose this slide because it's, one, I like pink, which is so weird because my favorite colors are red and blue, but it was more festive. And I think sometimes when we're talking about caregiving, you know, it's more of a kind of a, I don't know, a sadder moment. And I think that it doesn't have to be, and that caregiving can still be a lot of fun and like a party. So that's why I chose this one. So if we go to the next slide, and please let me know. So I started off, so this is my parents. That's my father and my mom. And I chose this story because, you know, at the heart of caregiving is our heart and the reason why we're all doing it. Whether you're a professional, family, whether you are a caregiver who is far away from your care recipient, or you're the one that's with them every day. And my parents are known for their love story, like everyone calls them the kissing couple. So this picture was really, to me, just showed their love. And so anyways, you'll learn a lot about my family or my stories and more from them, not too much about patients. But you guys are all reading what's next to it. And so this is a quote from former First Lady, Mrs. Carter, from the Rosencart Institute. And it's a very prominent saying that I think a lot of us can relate to. And so it does go that there are only 4 types of caregivers in this world. Those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So I think it's actually a great way to sum it up and how we all love each other. Did want to mention, sorry, the bell can't stop because that's to let the host know that people still want to come in. So anyways, now you're looking at this screen. So we're going to start off with who are caregivers. So in this session, we're going to learn a little bit more about us, the way maybe we're perceived, and then start talking about change thinking, and so that we can come up with those out of the box ideas to help us with all the behavior problems or issues that are coming along, which is where I get most of my questions in clinic from the families, is how to deal with things. So who are caregivers? This is your first time to be interactive with me. What I'm asking everybody is to flood the chat with, tell me, what do you think a caregiver is? You know, that word is used so loosely, and I think it's used without really understanding the meaning behind it, what and who caregivers are. And so I'm asking you to think of more in terms of professional roles. And so I put some pictures up there to help you get started. But if you wouldn't mind, if everybody could just type in, what do you think a caregiver is? The faster you type in, the faster we can move on. Just hinting. So there we go. Thank you, Ben. Person who provides for the needs and comfort. Sometimes I can see the chat and sometimes I can't. That can take care of themselves, disabilities, anyone who helps those that need care. How do we know we've become one? Someone who cares for another, help with daily living, doctors, social workers, family. Yep. Couple more. Anybody want to? There we go. Someone provides help and support. Person who cares for them. All professions, no discrimination. That I like that one too. Yes. Thank you, everybody. And keep flooding the chat because I will get to read them after. Someone who takes a person into the dementia, the whole person, housekeeping. Yes. So I'm going to close out my chat right now, but keep it coming because I read them all later too. So you were totally right. So when we talk about who is the caregiver, things people just say, oh, I'm a caregiver, that person's a caregiver. And the point of this, and this is actually something that we do in Savvy, this is like the first introduction, and it's a little more in depth than this, but what we're talking about is that getting people who are not caregivers to understand, and people who are caregivers to understand that caregiving is not just something simple, that your role changes as a disease progresses. And sometimes you drop roles and you pick up new roles, and sometimes you never drop any roles. The roles continue and you continually pick up more. And what do I mean by that? So when you first hear this diagnosis and it kind of just slams you in the face and you're like, what does this mean? Without even knowing it, you soon become the nurse. You're managing medications. You soon become the doctor or the nurse practitioner, interpreting and assessing. You become the housekeeper. You become the cook, the chauffeur. You become the lawyer. You become the accountant. You become the finance manager. And so that's a lot to bear on top of if you have children and if you're working. And so what we don't realize is that once you get this diagnosis and you become the caregiver, all of this is just thrown into a caregiver's lap. And you're expected to be able to do all these things, which most of us go to school, right, for quite a long time to be able to do what we ask you to do as soon as you get this diagnosis. And so this part is not to, it's to bring awareness to ourselves as caregivers, to think of us in a different way and to bring awareness to those around us. But it's also not meant to make you feel like, oh, I have so much on my shoulders, it's so heavy. It's also a time to celebrate all of us who are caregivers, professional or family, and even those, a way to stand up and give yourself a pat on the back and a clap for all the work that we all do every day. And so if we were in person, I would have everybody clap for themselves and impact. But since we're not in person, you can clap. I ask everybody to just clap for yourselves and all the caregivers that are on with us and that are, you know, all around the world dealing with the challenges that we do. So that's a little. Now if we're moving on, the next one is to think about the purpose. We do caregiving all the time without really even, sometimes I think, taking a moment to reflect back and to think why we're doing it. What is at the heart of this? And so this this other activity is to get us to think like, what is the purpose or goal? And so the question is to ask ourselves, at the end of the day, I feel that I or you have done a great job if. So if you came home from work, or if you're picking up your loved one from the adult daycare, if you're coming home from work, you have a paid giver or your family, how would you finish that sentence? How would you know that you're doing a good job, or how would you know that the person did a good job and that you're safe and you'll go to work the next day? So that's another activity for the chat. So let me know, like, finish the sentence. At the end of the day, I feel that I feel that you have done a good job if blank. I see some coming in. Wife is smiling. I like that one. That would tell you, yes, that everyone's been doing a good job. Okay, anyone else? How would you, some of you do have people coming in the home. How would you know that that they've been doing the job that you are? I am accomplished what I wanted to get done. If my mom did not have a meltdown for the day. If I didn't have a meltdown, I'd scold my mom. Yes, my brother is cooperative and engaged. If I show love, my mother is happy. Dad is alive and healthy. Yeah, and so I love these that are coming in. I still have a good attitude. And I'm laughing because I could very much totally relate to some of these that are coming in. And so I think it's really, you know, for us caregivers to understand, if I haven't hurt my brother's feelings, yeah, and we all try our best not to do that. That if we, you know, really understand, I'm still reading them, sorry for pausing, why we do it and what the purpose is. Because if we are sending our loved one to a daycare, to a facility, if we are asking people to come in, I think it's really important that we understand what our goal is, and the goals can change over time for the person that we're caring with, so that we can make sure that when someone else is taking care of them, they are doing, they're living up, I guess, to our purpose or goal, saying that a lot of times when you're the main caregiver, we set standards high because we know how to take care of our loved one. And sometimes we have to acknowledge that other people may not be so familiar and kind of pull back and let them have have a chance to take care of them. And then even for us caregivers, really understanding what's at the heart of it. I hear a lot in the clinic, well, I have to. There's no one else. Well, it's my parent. And other ones are very more expressive, like what all of you expressed today. But even when people are saying, I have to, I don't have a choice, they have a choice. There's something else behind there that's keeping them, in the situation. So it's just great to acknowledge. And a lot of my caregivers like to journal this every day or once a week about, what their purpose and their goal is and how they're reaching it. So it's sometimes it can be cathartic. So now we're going to talk about facts of caregivers. Let me introduce you to my main core of family and home. I am the main caregiver and do my dad's care needs, whether it's with his providers, who are both NPs and MDs, through all therapies. And so in the middle, of course, you've already met my mother from the second slide. To the top left is my nephew, my brother's Otis, Hope Heal Plenty, who was also my father's favorite second guy. And then my niece on the other side, Moana, she's named after my mom. And then my other half, whose also name is John. So, we have a core group. My niece and nephew try to help out once or twice a week. And then the rest is on us, like many of us. So let's start talking about us. So a lot of these stats, many of you may know, but this is just to, again, we're bringing more awareness and learning about ourselves. So we know that majority of the care is done in the community. There are some people who still assume that majority is in the care homes, and it's not. Most of the care that's done is by caregivers taking care of people at home. It's mostly by women, and that's for various reasons. There's some that say women, that's kind of more innately within us. I don't think that's always true. Another point is that a lot of times the women are living longer. Yay for us. No. And so sometimes that's why it's mostly women. Now the average hours, 6 hours, when a lot of people see this, they're like, no, it's a 24/7 job, which we all know. But the average 6 hours is really what they did in that study was they were looking at specifically to ADLs, like the cooking, I'm not cooking, like the bathing, the dressing, grooming. And so what they were doing was they were timing it from the start to the end. And so it was in direct care in that sense, 6 hours a day. But for all of us who are caregivers, we know that this is a 24/7 never ending job, especially as the disease progresses, especially if they're a wanderer, especially if they don't sleep at night, that there isn't a mark. It is an average. So 5+ years is normal. And whether believe it or not, a lot of people don't believe, but it is on average 10 to 20 years. And because of our, we're living longer and because of our therapies, it is stretching to be about that far. So I'm about over the 10-year mark already. It is a 40+ hour week job, like we were just talking about. And then the next statistic you're looking at is a care recipient, meaning that's what CR stands for, the person actually receiving care. This study showed that they're getting about 171 hours versus 66 hours for those without dementia. And that's for, direct care, taking care of them. Typically there's one in charge, like if you were on before we started, and I were speaking, and that happened in my family, it came to me. The background behind that is I wasn't living in Hawaii anymore. I had left. And at the time I was at Cedars in LA, and my mother called and she asked me to come home because the disease was progressing too fast for her. And she felt she could not care for dad on her own anymore. So I packed up and I came home. And ever since then, I've been taking care of dad. And I think that sometimes it was a blessing in disguise because I had every intention of becoming a plastic surgeon. I had no intention of going into geriatrics and neurology. And I'm so sorry, I think I forgot to share that. So my background is geriatric neurology, brain health, and native Hawaiian health. My population of interest is Alzheimer's, dementia, and caregivers, especially improving financial resources and policies. So, I was raised by my grandmother. I'm her namesake, and I spent my whole life with Kupuna. And when I was in the hospitals, I would hang out with them when they had no one coming to visit them. And so I think in some ways, it brought me to where I was really supposed to supposed to be. And so I'm grateful and happy for that. And we talk about dementia always in a lot of negative state. And one thing that I asked the support group that I lead is that, tell me one thing that you're grateful for from this disease, or you're grateful for the disease. And it's a really different way to look at this. And so in that sense, I am grateful for the disease in that way because it brought me to where I should be. So moving on, because sorry, I insert little stories all the time here. We have family conflicts. We'll be talking about that soon. And if people were listening to us, that has come up. Multi-generational, what this was bringing was, if you were on last time, we talked about this a little bit, is the awareness that this is not anymore only spouses taking care of their loved ones, that we have kids, we have grandchildren, we have children in elementary that are helping, we have children in high school, and to bring awareness that when we have working caregivers, especially around my age, who are still trying to, in their career, in the core of their career, and younger, that those things need to be discussed and talked about in schools and at work, that caregivers are priority at home, and anything you can do to help them can make them better, such as flexible hours, working from home, at home and in the office, if we can do a blend. That high school kids and college kids may have to miss tests sometimes because they're taking their care recipient to the doctors, just like spouses and children. And that we have to help those who are trying to develop their career, because I've met a lot of caregivers in their 50s and 60s who are unable to get work because the gap on their resume was just too far apart. And so there's a lot of other factors that are affecting caregivers, not just the direct care. So we're looking at us caregivers too, our physical and psychological issues. We work long hours, right? There's no breaks, no vacation, there's no time off. We have sleep disturbances. I sleep every 2 to 3 hours because he has to be turned, right? Every 2 hours and then changed. So my alarm goes off continually throughout the night. So, but that's the way that it goes. Some have been found to have low self-esteem, emotional stress, medications. There are some caregivers who need medication boost for depression and other issues. And there's nothing wrong with that. These are things that we do need to tackle, and it needs to start becoming part of the daily and regular conversation. With social isolation, we think of that always in terms of only the person with the disease. But if we are honest about it, so do us caregivers. We become so isolated from the world too, because everything revolves around our care recipient, and our circles become smaller. And we've discussed by the support groups that people are, Emily's joining us. She's on the floor today. I'm so sorry, see what happens when you get distracted. But, we start losing friends, where people get frustrated that you can't show up, you don't show up. Or when you show up to something, you leave early or you come late. And so I think there's more education and awareness that needs to go out, because for a lot of people, when they leave the house, they can just leave the house. And like, I will use me as an example. When I leave the house, I have to figure out how he's going to get turned, how he's going to get changed, who's going to feed him, how do I float his heels so there's no pressure ulcer, who's going to do range of motion to exercise his hand and arm so there's no contractures setting in. And so I have a very small window, if I am even going to leave the house, to the house. And now my father has dysphagia, and we have a suction machine, and he chokes sometimes when he's sleeping. So I can't even leave him alone for long. I sleep with the door open or downstairs next to him, because throughout the night, if he starts choking, I have to wake up and suction him. So I don't think people understand a lot of times all the factors that are coming in. And many caregivers in the support groups have shared that being a parent is extremely hard. I'm not saying that for all of us who have children. Mine is autistic, but I think they've all shared that becoming a caregiver again was more difficult and had more challenges than when they were being a parent. And I think it's because, you can't just take the person with you, and it's still an adult. But anyways, we'll dive in more to that. We've got to move on. We have a lot of economic distress and a decrease in health and healthcare. And we talk about self-care all the time, and it kind of, I think it's lost because we're always driving that in. But we do have caregivers who are getting sick and who are passing away before the person that they're caring for. And so then we must talk to caregivers about what is a backup plan. If you pass first, what happens to your care recipient? So things like advanced health directives, thing like a power of attorney, those things should be getting done as well as writing down your plan, especially in this time of COVID when we are so uncertain. What is to happen to the person if you come down with COVID or you get sick? What is the backup plan? What do you want done? Where do they go from here? Because other than that, right, we'd be appointing state appointed guardians in some cases. So those are just tidbits to think about as we're in this pandemic, and even if we weren't in a pandemic. And then the grieving for caregivers, the grief doesn't end. It is a long time. If you're a caregiver for 20 years, you are continually grieving, which is something that I don't think people understand either. And that every time the disease changes, the grief process begins over and over and over. And so a lot of times it's not too bad to think about behavioral health or just having somebody, you know, to sit down and talk to, or to join one of the support groups. Kathy has one, I have one. We're open to welcoming anybody in, so please let us know. Okay, so what things do we deal with as caregivers? A lot of this we know, so we're gonna go through these slides kind of fast. We do our personality traits, depression. Please remember, if we were talking about it last time, for your care recipients, sometimes depression can mimic the symptoms of dementia or Alzheimer's, and so if we treat the depression, the symptoms disappear. Also, those with dementia may have depression, and so it's always good to let them see a behavioral health or to bring that up to your PCP and geriatrician. Okay. And we talked about last time the differences between dementia and Alzheimer's. If you weren't with us, please wait to the end and you can ask me that question and we can go over it because they're not the same. We can talk more about other things that you may have missed. We have to deal with the effects of the disease. Remember, we are not dealing with the person anymore. We are dealing with the disease. The person is no longer in control, the disease is, and so all of our reactions are to the disease, not to the person that we see in front of us. We have to deal with a lot of things with attention, aging, because if anybody remembers, is this a normal part of aging? Everybody can just shake or nod their head. So no, this is not a normal part of aging, but we do have to deal with a lot of aging issues, substance abuse and behavior. And so this is the one we were talking about, caregiving. So there are about 5 major types. This is not all inclusive. There are many more different types of family dynamics than this, but we'll go over them really quickly. So the solitary is that there's one person in charge. Boom, that's it. One person doing it all. The observed is what a lot of us experience, is that there's one person doing all the work. There are other people who are far away who have very strong opinions about what should and should not be happening. That's not to say that that's wrong or right, but I think that, you know, that is discussions for families to have and try to come together. And sometimes a third person, mediation, ho'oponopono, or just having someone else can really help. The person far away may not understand what the person who's doing all the work is going through, but the person who is doing all the work is not open to hearing ideas that maybe the other person, sometimes the person looking in can see things that we can't, and yet you may not understand. And there is a dynamic when one person is in charge of health and one person is in charge of finance. And that's where a lot of family conflicts come in. And especially if the parent has not dictated who is going to be responsible of what. We spend a lot of time sometimes in clinic and in hallways where, you know, getting into these conflicts. Do know that you need to, if you don't do this before, then you need your provider to write a letter of capacity, and then only a judge can declare someone incompetent. And then that's a very long process that then takes you to be able to become POA or in charge of their decision. So something to talk about with families. We have the tag team where it's like you take Monday through Friday, I'll come on weekends, or I'll take Tuesday, Thursday. I did have one family of 8. And this is the way they did it. Worked out great for them. There's an easy one where, yes, there's more than one, a family member taking care at the same time, but everybody has different goals. No one's agreeing on what is happening. And then we have the collaborative, where everybody is on the same page, has the same goals, and is agreeing. Of course, that sounds like that's the one that it should be. Who knows? We have a blend of mix. I think whatever works for your family is fine. Understand that sometimes family members don't help, and it's not always because they just don't. If they're not the one familiar, they may just resist because they're scared, right? They're losing their parent or their loved one or their sister, their brother. They're scared. They're not exactly sure. So a lot of times I try to tell caregivers is, yes, if your sibling is living away, tell them to come for a weekend, or for a week. But not only that, to set them up for the first day, but then let them spend some time alone with them, or even 3 hours on Zoom. Let that camera run and let them see what it is like for you. But then have the conversation about how the two can come together, because the decisions that you're making would, affect you and the person you're, and everybody, has to live with their decisions. So it really should be you know, a team effort on both sides. We can dive more into, if you guys have questions, like what to do for specific situations, and know that you will get my email at the end. And a lot of people from last week have sent me an email. If you're back on and I didn't answer you, I have seen them. I'm getting to it today. But you are more than welcome to always email me to ask me questions. I will do my best to answer, and if not, I will point you in the right direction of who to speak with. I'm just reading some of the chats real quickly, but I'm going to close that out. Okay. And so when we're looking at things, these are things that can help them. So, you want to do an introduction to them. You want to let the person, whether they're paid or your family member coming in to care for them, let them know how the person is. Explain to them. Give them the tips and tricks that you use to get things done. Like my father, right? To open his mouth, if you just hold the spoon like this, he won't open it. One, his vision is kind of deteriorated. He only can open one side of his mouth. And so we have to literally, tap his lip or push down. And that gives the sensation to the brain that something is there, and then he'll open his mouth to eat. So anything that from whatever stage, how to get them back into the house, whether it's you have to show them their favorite thing, distract them, or tell them that someone is in the house who may not be in the house, so that you can get them in there. Tell them their favorite show is on, or that they need to get ready to go somewhere, so that you can bring them back in. You want to share these things with people that were asking to come in. Create a daily schedule with, that was what I went down for, and I'm sorry. And give pictures or videos if you can, especially of range of motion. So my father has a book, and it starts off like, "Hi, my name is John. Thank you for coming to take care of me." I give him a little backstory. The next page is the tips and tricks, his favorite TV shows to put on to keep him engaged. You don't always want them in front of the TV, but my father likes Best Buddies, The Golden Girls, Cake Boss, and Goldbergs. That is it. Anything else, he gets so bored. If I put those on, and then I try to come in front of him to talk to him, literally my father just looks at me and he's like, no. And he turns and tries to get around me so he can watch his shows. So, we learn things. Any other show he doesn't like. And then remember, sometimes what they see on TV, they think is real. So be careful with what shows are on. And so I have a schedule. And so it'll say things like 8 o'clock is breakfast, 9 a.m. first turn. And then I tick it down, like how to turn, where to place the pillows, where to place the wedges. And wedges are things like this, if they're in the later stages, and even if they're getting to middle late, that you can place under them so that their body actually turns. We also have things like this. It's called a heel protector. You see the space under here, and that's to prevent pressure ulcers. You can find these things on Amazon. You can also ask your insurance company or your provider to see if it'll get covered. You can write, if you're part of the VA system, and all of this. Yes, my father is a vet also. He has Kaiser and he's part of the VA. Then we have things like this, like an AFO that corrects their foot, because sometimes when they're in bed, their feet come in. So I usually have these things planned out. I have pictures for his range of motion that he gets twice a day. And then when I have caregivers come in, I train them and I show them how to do all these things, how to place everything. And then I turn it over to them and let them start doing it on their own. And, and then we work on it if things are needed. So those are just some of the little things. Going a little fast on this presentation. I do have a lot to share, but I want to leave more time for questions than we had last time. But yay, it's like my favorite part. Activity time. I know everybody is like so excited too, just like me. So here's your activity. And there's my mom. Everybody get out a sheet of paper if you have. If you don't, you're going to use the chat, which is totally fine with me. This is an activity that I don't just do in these presentations, that I actually do with caregivers that I see in clinic when we are working specifically on dementia care. So for all the caregivers out there, and this one you should be able to light up the box. We're going to learn about contented involvement later, but my question right now is, if you had 15 minutes of free time, and I mean free time, you don't have to worry about your care recipient at all. They're safe, they're taken care of. What would you do if you had 15, 30, 1 hour the entire day? Now, usually before you guys start, I will have somebody bring me literally a sheet of paper and they will write at least 3 to 5 things. And this is that they keep it in their back pocket, they tack it up on their wall. So when they have this free time, they can pull this out, look at it, and get straight to their caregivers. We spend like an hour trying to figure out what to do. And then by the time we figure it out, our time is up. So if everybody would put in the chat, what would you do? And you cannot run errands and you can't clean your house. Those are the only rules. It has to be things to rejuvenate you. Play a game on a phone. I've got that one, okay? I do that when I have time. Okay, what else would you guys do? Call a friend. I like that. Take a walk. Sit back and relax. Nap. Yep. Eat, go out for a walk. Shower. Nap. Sleep. Hang in the garden. Take a long shower. Stretch. Surf the entire day. Check on my chameleon. 15 minutes. I like that. Hike in the jungle. Swimming in the pool. Nice. Thank you guys. And I see that more is still coming in. So yes, keep it going. Swim or bike for the entire day. Dip in the ocean. Yes. So we all have our things that we like to do. 1 hour lay down. So keep it going because I read them after. So I think, you know, and then we have to think out of the box. How do we do our self-care activities if we can't get to it? So I grew up in the ocean my entire life. My father took us diving every weekend. That's what we had to do. We had to be in the water before the sun hit. And we were usually coming out around 11 or 12. So I can't go to the ocean that much anymore. So I will tell you guys what I did is, and then the pool across the street got closed right for the pandemic. So I bought a blow up pool. And I put it in my patio and I filled it up. And when I can't make it down to the beach, that's how I relax, is I sit in my blow up pool on my lanai and I put on my glasses and my sunscreen and I sit back and look at the sky, pretend that I'm at the beach. And that's how I go. And I'll just share one more story before we move on. We did have a family who she wanted to take her mom to get a pedicure. That's all she wanted to do. So, you know, being a dementia caregiver is just everything is thinking out of the box. How can we do everything that we did? How can we do it differently? And so what we did was didn't have anyone to take care of them. But when they found contented involvement, they found an activity that would keep dad involved for about an hour. So we talked about it. So they got those portable spas, found a room in the house that would be a little quiet, put on the music. And then the mom and daughter put their feet, in the pedicure and the spa, and they had like they had mimosas. And so for an hour they got to spend together, giving each other pedicures and manicures. So we couldn't take them to the shop. We brought it to them. So those are the things that we're talking about. Okay. And then these are the reasons. These are some of the reasons why we do the things, which I'm sure everybody can agree with and has way more to add to this list. Skydiving, never got to do it yet. Still want to do it. I know this picture makes me want to go skydiving down in North Shore. All right, this one is from something from Savvy. Now we can't just do Savvy whenever we want, but this was a way to show, and this came out of a university from a professor who did an experiment with his students, and what he found out was that he could anyway, move on. So what he found was that he could classify all the students' feelings, right, as positive or negative, and then powerful or powerless. And what we realized was that we could take this over to caregivers. And so if everybody could put in the chat really quickly, what are some of the feelings that you feel as a caregiver? Like, how did you feel the day that you got the diagnosis? How did you feel you know, how do you feel on Mondays and Wednesdays when you take care? Like, what are the feelings that associate you with caregiving? And it can be positive or negative because we have both in this caregiving one. So anybody want to share? You feel happy, grief, yep, sad, heartbroken, frustrated. Exactly. And the list will keep going. Overwhelmed. Mhm. And so what we find is that a lot of us fall into that, if you see on the bottom, the negative, powerless, right? A lot of us feel those emotions. Sadly though, anger is a negative but a powerful emotion because you feel that you're in control to some point. Especially, right, you can think back to when we're arguing, especially with when you get into a fight with your other half, right? Anger makes you kind of feel kind of drive. But what this is trying to show you guys, and I'm not in front to like move my hand around and show you kind of where to go, but if you look down at the bottom in the negative and powerless, a lot of our frustration, we're heartbroken, we're sad, we feel that we can't do anything about this situation. And this is also true for behaviors or repetitive questions. You know, when we're trying to figure out what to do, we feel powerless. So what we do in the class is that what we do is we ask everyone to pick a behavior or a feeling that is bothering you the most, and we devise a plan, any plan, because you know your caregiver the best. And I'll be frank, you know, coming to a clinician's office or coming to Savvy and expecting someone to hand you the answers of exactly do this. No, what we do is we give you the tools to go out and to do what you need to do to, you know, improve your quality of life as a caregiver, the person, because every story is different, every person is individual. So Savvy and Dealing with Dementia is set up to give you the tools to then go and do contented involvement, to go and make these plans. And so what we found though is that just caregivers making a plan, verbally or writing it down, already takes you from the negative powerless to the negative and powerful box, because you've made a plan, you're in some sort of control, you're trying to do something. And then get to the positive and powerful that you actually implemented the plan. And if the plan works, great. If the plan doesn't work, that's okay. Please understand that if something doesn't work out the way you wanted it, that is totally fine, because you generated new information. Now you know what doesn't work, and then now you can move on to the next. And to be honest, that's exactly what happens when you walk into our offices, a clinician's office. We listen, we make a plan, we implement that plan with you. What do most of us say? If it doesn't work, you're having the symptoms in 3 to 5 days, please come back, or in a week, we want to check in with you, because we want to know if our plans work. Because if our plan isn't working, we know that that's not the right thing. We're going to go to plan B. Okay, so it's the same way that we're working at, and we don't get heartbroken. We don't think that we failed. We know that, okay, that wasn't the right one. We know that. Take that off the list. Now let's move on to the next one. Okay. And so I just want caregivers to know that everything you're doing is amazing. We start off with acceptance for caregivers. And we do start that off in the program too by asking caregivers, you know, that we have to accept that this disease is irreversible and progressive. And if we can accept that, then we're able to move on and start opening up to other things. And this does not happen overnight for some. For some, it happens fairly quickly. For others, it takes a long time, and that's okay. Because watching the person that you love fade away is, you know, there isn't really words to describe it. And so we very innately want to bring that person back. And we think that when we reorient them and we tell them that they're wrong, or that it's Monday, it's not Friday, or that grandpa died and he isn't here, that we're doing them a favor. But in a lot of times we're causing grief to happen all over again. We're causing, we can cause behaviors and agitation, because it's not important for them to know those things anymore. That's only important to us. We want to help them explore the emotional truth behind what they're telling us. Usually if they're asking for someone who has passed, it's just because they miss them. It's a time to bring out picture books. It's a time to ask them, tell me a story about that person, or what do you remember about the person, or yeah, isn't that the story where they would drop off bread every Friday? Tell me about that. A lot of times they're just telling you, they want to just talk about the person. They want to just have that moment. Dealing with somebody with dementia is a lot about reading in between the lines and understanding what they're trying to tell us when they're not telling it directly to us. Okay, so in order to care effectively for a person living with dementia, you must accept the way things are and then introduce change into your life. And that is all about a caregiver for dementia and Alzheimer's. It's about adapting and changing, because we must enter their reality. They cannot enter our reality anymore. We live here in this world. They live in a different world. Whatever they say, whatever they do, whatever they're feeling is true. It is true to them as it is true to us. And it was the same as the example I used last time, where if we both looked up at the sky and I saw the sky is red, how would you convince me that the sky is blue? And how can I convince you that the sky is red? Whatever is happening for them, it is true and it is real. And so if you go against that, that is a time to butt heads and to start the arguments again. This I just like to show, we're going to go through the next slides really quickly, a little faster, that this is what it feels like to live, you're a person living with dementia, that they are confused constantly, and the confusion progresses as the disease progresses. And we all know what it's like to be confused in a conversation, when Google Maps takes you to the wrong place consistently, and you are like an hour late for the party, and now you are like frustrated and annoyed and irritated. And you know, that's what it feels like for the person living with disease. And sometimes when we do things like, Mom, did you hear what the doctor asked you? Mom, what do you want? It can sometimes be very, you know, because they are trying to understand and answer and figure it out and connect the dots. And know that from the time you say something to them, to the brain, to processing, to getting it back to you is anywhere from 10 to 40 seconds or longer as the disease progresses. So slow it down. We have to get on board with their time, slow things down, give them the time to process. My father literally takes about a minute to a minute and 30 seconds to smile at you after you've smiled at him. So a lot of times I tell the kids, don't smile at him and then walk off. Like stand there and hold the smile. It does feel weird, right? You're smiling for like a whole minute, like, hi, Dad. That's how I started talking to him. How are you today? And then about a minute later, he smiles. But if you walk away, you know, you can miss it. So those are the moments that we cherish along this journey. All right. So here's another thing to do is the confusion. It affects all of our thinking abilities. The confusion grows as the disease progresses, our thinking powers decrease. And then just here's another way of looking at it. You know, the person is in charge in the beginning. You'll see at the top of the screen, they're usually in charge of, you know, and this is meaning behaviors and how things affect them. But as the disease progresses, you see that the word person gets smaller, and the other words, others and setting, that affects the person more, their behaviors, the way they respond to things, and those grow. Okay, so we got the stages. We got the early, we got the middle, and late. Now, many people use a lot of different scales. You might have heard early, early middle, early late, middle, early middle, you know, late stages, end stages. And so really we just break it down and keep it simple. We got early, we got middle, we got late, you know. And so you can answer more questions. I just want to make sure that everyone is okay, right? I'm not sure who that is. I can't see everybody anymore. Okay, well, and so we went over this last time a lot in depth. If not, you'll get the slide deck. You can ask questions more at the end. And when we're looking at this, we need to understand kind of where they're at. Now, remember, dementia is not a dark lined box like this fits in early, this is middle, and this is late. A lot of times a person can be in one thing, like the feeding stage could be early, but maybe their cognition is already in the middle. And so it very much varies. It's a very gray area and a gray box on how to do these things. And then we're going to move to the big one, which I had everybody repeat last time. And so repeat to yourselves, all behavior has meaning. All behavior has meaning. Thank you for the person who has their microphone unmuted. And really, we try to, when we're starting to talk about behaviors, really hone in on this and really get this with caregivers in. And this is kind of what, you know, Savvy really dives into and dealing with dementia, touches on, and your reach trainers can really come in and work with you one-on-one, because reach trainers come to your home. And so what are we talking about? Some of you who are joining me, I'm going to share the repeat of the first story. That one makes the most impact, and then we'll talk about other ones. So when we have a behavior, and this ABC model is actually used with autistic children and adults, but there is always an activator, there's a behavior, and there's a consequence. I don't care for the word consequence. I usually just ask what happens after the behavior. And so I ask my caregivers to keep a diary and to journal for me. And what I ask them to do is, when you have a behavior happening, I want you to keep a journal and tell me the day that it's happening, the time, who was around, what was happening. I also want to know what was happening before, what was happening after. Sometimes behaviors are in response to something, but the behavior might not show up immediately. Sometimes it shows up hours, and sometimes it shows up days later. And it's because we may have forgotten about it, but something triggers something for them to remember something, and the behavior comes out. Now, there are immediate behaviors also. So always remember, something happened, there's a behavior and consequence. And why is this so important? Because too many times we say things like, that is just a dementia behavior, and we blow it off and we move on, and we say, oh, mom and dad are just acting like that again. It's time to, this always happens. As the thinking abilities decline and they can't make judgments, and their language skills are deteriorating, the only way for them to let us know what is happening is through a behavior. So all behavior has meaning, because their behavior, they are talking to you, they are telling you what they are feeling, thinking, need, and want. And I ask a lot of people to start going back in time, like the movie Benjamin Buttons. We're seriously going back in time. That is why their long-term memory stays. Start thinking of how you acted when your children were very young, before they could talk and tell us what to do. What did we do? We relied on their behaviors. If they were crying, what did we do? We fed them, we changed them, we hugged them, we tried to burp them. If they were throwing a tantrum, we were trying to figure out what caused it. If they came screaming into the room crying, right, we got all frantic. Oh my God, what happened? What happened? What happened? Tell me, tell me, tell me. And then you're running around trying to figure out what happened. It's the same thing now that the person is older. We forget that because the person is older in front of us. So we still think of them like an adult, and they should be able to do this, and they cannot anymore. So when they are having a behavior, they are talking to you. They're telling you, I'm scared, I'm angry, I'm frightened, I'm mad, I need this, I want this. They're trying to grab the same things. And so not to beat this down death, but I'll just share a couple examples. So the first one, and forgive me for all of you who were on last week, you're going to hear this again, but I worked in a facility where the nurse aides wanted restraints and complained all the time about somebody being combative when they put them to bed, and when they were transferring them. And so they came to me and they wanted restraints, which I refused. I'm not a fan of restraints, physical or pharmacological, unless it is absolutely necessary, because we, the caregivers, must understand them. So I asked them to show me what they were doing. Well, they showed me what they were doing. And so I gave them a little explain about how dementia works. And so it went like this. This was my answer. If you were lying in a bed and two or three people came at you, or in a shower or wherever, you're hot because you're running around. But remember, a lot of places have AC, the windows are open, they're feeling cool. 2 to 4 people came at you and started taking your clothes off, and you had no idea who these people were, or trying to change their diaper. What would you do? Would you just lay there and let them do that to you? No, you would fight back. You would hit them. You would strike. You would swear. You would yell. You would scream. So are they being combative, and are they being bad, and are they having behaviors? No, they are telling you that they don't understand what is happening, that they are scared, and to please stop what you're doing and do something to help them. And so what did we start doing after we changed the tone in our voice? The staff came in, hi, uncle, hi, auntie, spend time with them, grab their hand, rub their hand, smile at them. We did things very nicely, not in a rush where you're trying to just take off their clothes because you're looking at task management and you're trying to move on. We went on their time, made sure they were covered with a blanket, made sure that we put out one arm, washed them, put the arm back in, made sure that they felt safe and warm. And I have helped a couple of CNAs when they're transferring or they're turning. And while the person is punching and fighting back, I grab their hand and I hold their hand and I smile. And I'm like talking to them. while the CNAs are doing what they need to do. And it really calms the person down and brings them down. So what I'm trying to get at is it's all about our approach and how we're handling it. If we're mad, they're going to be mad because they feed off of our energy. If we're happy, they'll be happy. And they very much will know if you are mad, irritated, or angry, and that will feed off onto them. And so for my staff that is on listening, it is very much about how we approach, and we'll be continuing with our dementia training very soon. But just for everyone to understand that that behavior is trying to tell you something. They are not being difficult on purpose. They are doing their best that they can with this disease. And we did have one, and this is in the Dealing with Dementia book, a husband did share that it was the tone of voice in his wife that made him get. And so, you know, when she heard that, I'm sure it wasn't, but it was something that was probably needed to be said. All right, moving on to the next one. So we're talking about memory. And so last week we went over challenges, so I'm not going to cover that. We're going to talk about the caregiver considerations, like the social skills that are forgotten. They can't rely on memory to prompt, orient, or stimulate. And don't expect new learning, and they may be familiar, they may feel familiar, but everything is new. And what are we talking about here? So we need to understand as caregivers that, you know, these things are going away, that when we talk with people, a lot of times we can just tell people what to do. So that's one of the first things to go when we're helping them. Then it moves into us showing them, like actually showing them what we want to do. So, you know, for a lot of my staff on here, when you want our residents to do something, you might want to, they're not understanding verbally, you want to show them what to do. A lot of times they will follow it. After that, we need to sit next to them and actually like take their hand, put their hand on something. We want them to grab it. We also want to understand that we can't expect new learning. So when we say things like, oh, I just told you, oh, it's the 100th time. Come on, get out of the wheelchair. Come on, move to the bed. Or when we're at home with them, Mom, that we are expecting them to, for some reason, have this new learning. We cannot expect new learning. That is gone. That is not part of the disease. It doesn't allow them to learn new things. And so we have to understand that this is where we're at, and then we're going to move backwards. And they may, a lot of times people will say like, oh, they remember me. They may. That is perfectly true. A lot of times it's just this sense that they're familiar. So it takes them about 2 weeks to get used to a new place or to a new, but they will feel this sense of familiarity. So a lot of times people will say, oh, look, your dad remembers you. He smiled. He doesn't remember me. He just sees me every day. He just is familiar with me. And, you know, I hope this makes everyone laugh. But I still remember the day I came home to visit. I was living in Oklahoma at the time. I wasn't even in LA yet. And I came home to visit. And my dad looked at me and he was like, who are you? And I said, Dad, it's me. I came to him to surprise him for his birthday. I was like, it's me. It's Pookie. It's your daughter. He called me his baby girl. I'm like, it's your baby girl. And my dad looks at me and he goes, I don't have kids. And he stood up and he walked away. And, you know, yes, my mom's jaw dropped. I just started cracking up laughing. And I was like, all right, we're at this point. He doesn't remember that he had kids. So he's not, oh my God, he wasn't even in his 20s anymore, because my sister was born when he was still in his 20s. So I was like, wow, we are really down that path. And, you know, then I also looked at my mom and was like, hey, do you have something to tell me? Of course, she was like, shut up. So we just started laughing. And so it turned it into a good moment. All right, language skills. Again, they're going to get frustrated with word finding. You know, I do that sometimes. You've seen me already on this talk. I talk and then I'm like, I'm trying to find the word. But imagine what it's like for somebody who really cannot process the words and find the right words. So when we're talking about this, their language may be unreliable to a point. We want to use short sentences. We want to do visual and tactile communication, because verbal skills are declining, right? It's one of the first things to go, and allow pleasure in verbal interactions. So what do we mean by that? So look for what they're trying to tell us without them telling us. They may use the wrong words. So now we're a detective. We got to figure out what that word really means. Yes, as a historian, sometimes I cannot rely on them in clinic. So that's why I always want to speak to family. But saying that, I will speak to the person with dementia. I always want to hear from them no matter what stage they're at, even if they're nonverbal, because I need to hear their side. I need to see what's behind the eyes, what's in that emotion. Just because they are losing their language skills does not mean they can't communicate, and does not mean what they are saying is not real. Whenever a person with dementia says something, there is some truth behind it. There is something there, and that we really need to start honing in and figuring out what that is. We very much want to use short sentences. The way that I'm talking would go right over. So we want to be very concrete, concise, let's go for a walk. Let's eat dinner. Time to eat dinner. Not after I bathe, then I'm gonna get showered, then I'll come down and set up the table. Then after I set the table, then we're gonna go outside and then we're gonna eat dinner. Like that's just too much already. We want to keep it short and concrete. We also want to talk to them in real time. Okay, not, oh, we're gonna go to dinner on Friday. We're coming up to that slide. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. That's abstract for them. It's very hard, especially when they've passed the early stages, to understand that. Sometimes they may get ready now. Some if they're in the early stages, you can keep a lot of these things going, but just be cognizant, because they are very good too at masking, some of the issues. That's why a lot of people will say, right, what, your mom has dementia? No way. Like, oh yes, you stay with her for 7 days and you'll see it. So we want to move on now. So we're talking about reasoning, and this is where a lot of, I'm not going to read the slides too much anymore, but this is a lot of times where we're having that conflict, because we want them to understand what we are saying. We want them to understand this cause and effect relationship. We want them to, we're reasoning with them. Don't leave the stove on. You're going to burn down the house. That was no connection already. We don't want them to leave the stove on. We have to figure out other things. Are we turning off the gas? Are we unplugging the stove? Are we taking off the knobs? And so these are kind of things of thinking out of the box. What can we do so that we can keep the environment safe? And it's a lot of work for us, but these are thinking out of the box. We can't get rid of the stove. You and I come home, we have to cook. So what are things that we can do? Sorry, everybody, they're texting me downstairs about my father. Okay. So, see, and then I lose track of what I'm talking about. So what do we want to do? We need to try other things, and I can go back to the memory and language skills. So I'll take it back a little bit. For memory, we can use memory aids. So some of the caregivers share that for their mom, and I'm sorry, everybody, we'll go back slides too, so that we're going forward, not back. So what some of them do is, and there's a store called alzheimersstore.com. You can Google it. I go on there and then I go to Amazon because it's really expensive, but they have aids. So they have things like those huge calendars that for a lot of people will help. You can write the schedule on them, and especially in the early stages, they're still able to look at the calendars. They have the digital clocks, because the old clocks with the hands are difficult for them. So they have digital clocks. We have clocks that will prompt them. Time to get up, Judy. It's time to go to the bathroom. We have apps on the phone that we can set reminders for them, so that it'll pop up, and again, it'll say like, Judy, time to eat dinner, Judy, time to eat lunch. And the person is still at the stage where they are able to go and do that. We also have medication. You know how everybody has those pill boxes? We have electronic ones that you, the caregiver, can put on your phone so that they'll unlock at certain times. And then you can call and say, hey, mom, it's time to take your morning pills. And only that box will unlock, so that we can try and stop things like them taking multiple medications at the wrong time of the day, or multiple times. I've had people take, like 5 blood pressure pills at one time, and then, we're having an emergency state to get them in. So we have aids like that. My mother and I used to use those whiteboards, and just a whiteboard with a white marker for my father, and she would leave him messages like, John went to the store, be back at 10:05, because he could still read the clock. And we would place that on the dining table and in the bathroom, so he had 2 places to see it. And so we left prompts like that. She would also write like, at 8:05, eat breakfast, toast and coffee on the table, like in short sentences. And so he would eat his breakfast, and then he would just wait for my mom to come home. And so there's a lot of memory aids out there, and you can just Google memory aids for Alzheimer's dementia, and they will all pop up. Language skills, you know, this one is a little bit harder. Some people do use language cards, and we start using pictures. So we have, at one point, we did have signs around the house that said bathroom. We also had pictures of the bathroom after, when he could no longer read the signs, and arrows, so he kind of knew where to get through in the house. So those were aids that we were using to help. As his language went away, we would show him pictures. Is this what you're talking about, Dad? And he would nod his head or point to it. Yes, yes, that's what I meant. And so you can find those kind of cards anywhere online too. Going back to reasoning and finishing up with this, we really just have to understand that we can't expect to reason with them, and we can't bargain and negotiate, although I will have to say it does work sometimes. The hospice nurses, my father graduated from hospice. Unfortunately, I'm meeting with the hospice nurses again right after this for him to go back on. But they used to bargain with him. They used to give him chocolate. And if they gave him chocolate and rubbed his back, he wouldn't fight back when they were trying to change him. So, hey, never know what works. But we really have to stop with this trying to reason with them, and that they're going to think in this cause and effect. They're not. My father used to turn on the water and leave the water on. It was like a swimming pool in the kitchen at some times. We just had a lot of fun with it. And so that cause and effect is now gone. So we have to step in and start figuring out other ways. A lot of this comes with driving. He won't stop driving. Some things that we have tried is they've recorded the provider so that they can play it over for the person to say, like, you know, Mr. Smith, this is your doctor, you can't drive anymore. Some providers don't want to be recorded. We've written scripts so that they can show it to the person that says, look, your doctor said you can't drive, it's written here. They read it, they're like, okay, but know that they're probably going to forget in 15 minutes. Other things that caregivers have done is the battery. They've unhooked the battery, and so that the person can still have the keys, let the person go into the car, turn the car on, the car doesn't work. They're like, oh my goodness, the car doesn't work. I'll take it into the shop tomorrow. Caregiver, or sometimes the care recipient, you know, they're like, you know, they fuss about it, but they go back in the house. And then we start it an hour later, or, you know, we start this cycle an hour later or the next day. And then when the caregiver needs to use the car, they rehook the battery and they drive off. I've had caregivers take the air out of the tires sometimes if it was, you know, a car that's not going to be used. They've taken them down to the DMV, so they've failed the test. But remember, they're not going to remember this, so it's going to be a story that we have to tell. And I share these stories because this is what thinking out of the box is like. Giving them the wrong keys, so it can't fit into the ignition. Because when you get into that fight of, Dad, you can't drive, remember, it makes them, what do you mean I can't drive? What do you mean? I've been driving my whole life. I'm going to drive. And then we get into this fighting battle that nobody wins. And what are we really doing when we tell somebody they can't drive? Taking away the control they have in life. And so even in the home, like for my staff who are on there, when you're somebody, you know, come on, we have to go this way. No, it's time to eat. Let's go. You're asking them, trying to reason with them to get a cause and effect that they can't understand. So we have to take their hand, lead them to where they need to go, put our arm around them. So, you know, like there are other things that we do now to get our point across. Okay, these slides we do spend a lot of time on. Excuse me, I'm sorry. You know, we'll be moving a little bit faster. Judgment, all I have to say about this is it's always safety. They don't have judgment. Again, it goes with our, you know, the stove. They don't understand that leaving the stove on could burn down the house. Judgment in paying finances. You know, they may be paying too much. They may not pay. You may come and realize, like, why are they trying to foreclose on the house? You know, or scammers. They don't have the judgment to realize that this is a scam. It's not real. And so at some point we need to start, you know, reviewing finances, bank accounts, looking at what's going on. And so perceptions. So, you know, for the caregiver, a lot of this we talk about, and there's more to perception, but we'll just talk about hallucinations, delusions, and the environment. So that's what I was saying with the TV. My father is a vet. Before, he loved Army shows. Afterwards, we realized that when we played Army movies or shows, he thought it was really happening. And so, you know, what he would say, his verbal language, what things he was doing was in response to the TV. Like my sister and I love Law and Order SVU. Oh my goodness, but we had to turn it off because my dad thought what was happening was on TV. So he would go like try to, you know, attack the TV to save the person that's being attacked. So we had to turn off those shows. Other things in their perception is that they don't recognize themselves at one point in the mirror. And so they may think they are talking to somebody else. So they might get into an argument with themselves in the mirror. Keeping a diary is good because we can do things like sometimes they're sitting at night and then they tell you like, there's somebody trying to get in the house, or, you know, why is that person staring? And they get very frustrated. Well, it's because they may be seeing their reflection in your glass door or the window. So if you just close the curtain, that will go away. In terms of hallucinations, delusions, I am no way trying to talk about anybody in your religious preference. So however you feel, I totally agree with you. Just know that your person is at a different stage, and if they are seeing something, it is real to them. So again, to tell them that that person is not there is just going to cause another conflict and argument. And so I will usually acknowledge the person, and I just ask in clinic, or if I come into someone's home, do they, you know, does this person make you feel safe? Do they laugh? And if they tell me that yes, you know, it's like their best friend or they have a great time, then I will usually acknowledge the person. Like I'll be like, hi, Joel, you're here today too. Well, thank you for joining us. And then I move on with, you know, whatever I have to do. A lot of times they see children. They love to see children. Not sure why, but it's children that a lot of people see. Lewy body, there's a lot of hallucinations associated with that delusion. And so, you know, this is just part of the process. But remember, their reality, if they're seeing it, if they're hearing the voices, it's real. And you can let the PCP, the geriatrician, know. There could be some medications that could help with that. Just always know that with every medication comes a side effect. So please review those. And, you know, the geriatrician on board is really going to be looking at minimizing medications and interactions. My father was on a load. Now he's on 3, maybe 2 soon. So we really want to try and limit those. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is the abstraction. So that was kind of what I was talking about. I'm talking concrete terms, so not in terms of like, oh, we're going to go to Auntie's house on Friday, or at 6 o'clock tonight, we're going to watch this show. We just want to talk to them about what's happening at the moment. So concrete thinking, and you want to provide directions. This is very important to understand. If the person is, you can still talk to them and give directions and cues verbally. Or if it's only by sight now, they have to watch you demonstrate, they'll redo it. Or if they need tactile help, where you literally have to take their hand and like put it on the pen and then have them move the hand with the pen. So when my father was starting to stop beat, I would have to take his hand, put it onto the fork, and I don't have it with me. It's called the red plate, or the red plate, you guys can Google it. It's thicker spoons that bend. So the spoon will actually bend. So they don't have to do this motion. They just do this motion, which is a lot easier. This is, you know, fine motor skills are one of the first to go. So I would put his hand on the knife and bring it up to his mouth, and then he could do it after about 3 or 4 times. Then I'd have to do it again. We want to talk to them in very concrete ways, not, we don't want to do any abstract thinking. That really starts to fade fairly soon. So we're going to talk about attention now. So we're talking about the choice of task, the attention to the environment, disease distractions, monitoring and refocusing. Don't worry, we're going to be interacting really soon, so everybody can wake up a little bit. But what we're talking about here is that we want to look at the environment. Is it safe for them? Do we need non-slip rugs? Do we need grab bars? And if they wander, we can do things with the exits, such as putting a dark mat in front. You don't like water, and a lot of times a dark sheet or a dark mat they perceive as a hole, so they won't try to go over it. Or we hide the doors by putting like a picture of a bookshelf, you know, like wallpaper over it. Or we hide the handle. There are these plastic things that can go over the handle that even if they move the door, they try to shake it, the doorknob won't turn. We can put signs like not an exit. And sometimes that can help deter them from wandering. But you also want to highlight where the bathroom is, because the closet door looks like a bathroom to many people, and that's where we have a lot of accidents. Their vision starts to fade. So even in the bathroom, if you have white tile and a white toilet seat, they cannot always see where it ends and starts. So that's why a lot of times they urinate in the corner or they urinate in the closet because it looks like a bathroom to them. And so at night, you may want to keep like the light on in the bathroom so they can see it. You might want to change the color of the toilet bowl seat, and they do have them. And they actually do have lights that you can put in the toilet seat that it'll light it up and make it look red or blue so that they can focus in and they can use it. So that's what we're talking about. We're looking at the environment. Is it safe? And then being able to keep them attention. Is there distractions? If you want them to focus on this activity, don't have the radio on, don't have the TV on. And sometimes we will find a blank space or a wall and put the desk there so that they are facing the wall because they're free of distraction. So they'll stay engaged in their activity. Okay. Organization. We're talking at this time, and we'll learn quickly, is looking at the task, the right amount of order, support, and prompting. So we're talking about looking at the activity we're having them do. Is it the right task for them? Can they do 1,000 puzzle, or do they need the puzzles with the huge pieces? There's like 10 to 12 of them that we usually use for the younger children. So we have to fit the task to them. So I had a construction worker, I shared this one, and it wasn't safe for him to use the tools anymore, just like the story I shared about my father last week when he would make Hawaiian weapons. And so since he could not do, the first thing we did was we got him the children's construction set, they're big tools. He loved it. After that, when he couldn't do that, we got nuts and bolts and we gave that to him and we asked him to separate it. 2 hours, he was good. He was happy. He was content. He was involved. It was the right size. It was the right task for him. He would sort it out. Eventually, he didn't sort it out correctly. He would just sort it into piles. Does it matter if things are correct when they do things? No. We are just finding something for them that is to keep them content and involved. And so we need to know if we're having the right task and we're giving the right support, verbal, visual, or tactile. As a caregiver, as this progresses, you're going to spend more time with them. It's easy in the beginning, you can tell them what to do. Then you need to spend more time when you're showing them. Then you need to spend more time when you need to actually physically sit next to them so that they can complete the activity. So that's also something to be aware of. Again, we're looking for the emotional truth, validation, and then our responsibility to respond to that. We want to validate what they're saying. And I should have moved this slide earlier. This was in response to like if they're asking about someone who's passed away. Well, the emotional truth is that they missed the person. So let's validate that. And we always tell them that they're correct because they are in their world. Whatever they say is true. So if they are mad, angry, or sad, it is correct. And a lot of times if you will validate and acknowledge those feelings, they start to calm down. And a great way to work with them is just to smile when they are not so happy. A lot of times they will, smile back. Sometimes, yes, they're like, why are you smiling at me for? Well, we try. Not everything we do is going to work every single time. And sometimes when we find something that works, when the disease progresses, it doesn't work anymore. And then we need to try something new. So now we're going to talk about, we want to focus on what they still can do, not what they can't. We focus way too much on what they can't do. We need to start thinking about, this is just another way to think about it. What can they still do? Celebrate their strengths, celebrate what they still can do. For instance, I had a daughter who told me, oh, mom can't take care of herself. I got to do it all, brush her teeth and brush her hair. So I said, well, I just want to see, can you put the hairbrush and mom, just try it. She did, and mom brushed her hair. And so after that, mom brushed her hair every day until she really couldn't. Sometimes as caregivers, we jump in and we want to do everything for us. Why? Because it's easier. It's faster for us. And also because we want to take care of them. But let's slow it down. Let's let them do what they can. We want them to stay as functional as they can for as long as they can. This we went over last time. You'll get this in the slides. I'm not going to go over. This is basically telling you in the early, middle, and late stages. On average, again, this is in black and white, this is gray. If they're in the early stages, they can usually handle 4 to 6 steps. It can involve some abstracts, what I'm saying, depending on their level, and they can travel beyond their immediate areas. And if we look at the late, middle stages, they can only take about 1 to 2 steps. It needs to be very concrete, and they have to be at a table with no distractions or at a table facing a wall. So you see how it had drastically changed. And again, the person you're caring for may be in the early stages in one thing, and then they could be in late for another thing. And my father is already at the late stage. He's very passive. Every single thing must be done for him. And so that's just kind of a quick guide to help you kind of figure out what to do. So here's always the bing, 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 what everybody wants to learn about. Excuse me. Content involvement. What does that mean? We want to look for activities that keeps them involved in the activity, and it makes them happy. So you can read the slide on your own. I will just give you examples. We start off with the person. If they were a librarian, if they like to travel, what kind of things, and you guys are more than welcome to add things into the chat, but what kind of things do you think you would start off with if you know that the person is a librarian? Like, let's go back to that, to this one, and think about if they were in the early stages. Librarian is somebody who likes to garden. What kind of things would we now be doing for them? What would you do for, so what I mean is that when we're starting to think about contented involvement and tasks to fit them, we start thinking about who the person was before the disease. What kind of things did they like? What kind of things did they like to do? So if I gave you the background that this person was a gardener, what kind of, loved plants, loved being outside, what kind of things would you suggest, activities that they can do? Anybody? Walk in the yard, pick flowers. Exactly. Transplant a flower. Watering plants. Walk outside in the garden. Water there. That's right. See, so you guys got the idea, and we want to see where they're at, which will come out in this slide. Fitting the task, because what we're looking at is matching the task and ability. So if they can still do those things, is it safe for them to still use, garden tools? Let's take them outside and let them do all the things you guys mentioned. Now, if we're progressing along, what do? Well, we bring the garden inside. Let's bring it to the table. They can sit at the table and they can garden at the table. But maybe it's not safe to use tools, so they're just going to use their hands. We also still want to try and take them outside and maybe just let them put their hands in the dirt. And remember, when we're talking about contented involvement, they do not have to do the task properly. And we should not expect the task to be done properly. We are just looking for things that they like to do. And here is where it fits with the activity that you guys did for me. If you know that mom likes to garden, or dad, and if you take him out in the garden and it's safe, dad will garden for 1 hour. Now this is, you don't have to worry about falls. You don't have to worry about them using, what does that mean? You get to buzz out that list that you wrote and you're like 1 hour. You find your 1 hour activity and you go and do that while mom or dad is content and involved in their task. And that is how those two come together and they work. If mom is gonna sit at the table and garden, there you go. And you know, that's a 30-minute, you bring out the list and you're like, I got 30 minutes, and you go and do that thing that's going to rejuvenate you. And that's how we bring those things together, because we got to take care of the caregiver to take care of the care recipient. You need to put that oxygen mask on first, like the airline tells you, before you do for the person you're caring for. Now, what other things can we try? If they were a librarian and love to travel, even gardening, we can do gardening books, gardening shows, gardening pictures. If they liked to travel, there's a million shows on about traveling. Pull out their old travel books. Let them look at it, tell you stories. Some of them like to pretend they're doing a presentation. Here's another, and we did, you know that we had one person who was a resident. He loves giving presentations. He was a professor. So what did we do? We let him give presentations to the other residents. Not all of it made sense. Not all of it was true anymore, but hey, he was giving his presentation. He was so happy because he felt like he was, doing what he did his whole life. We've had a physician who got dementia. So he's in a assisted facility. We talked to the nurses. They give him fake charts every day that we've developed. He reviews them. He makes notes. He takes the nurse's blood pressure medicine for them on every shift. He's happy. He feels like he's still doing his work, because why? They still need to feel, it's a human response to feel that you are part of something and that you're contributing. So what are other things that we can do when we're talking about contented involvement? I have a caregiver who shared that his mother likes to change light bulbs. We bought her 3 different types of light bulbs. She goes around the house for 2 hours a day. She changes light bulbs. She's happy. It doesn't have to be something we think is going to be content and involved. She is happy. She does it. He has a list. He does his thing for 2 hours. He comes back, and then mom and him move on to the next thing. He gets a break. She gets a break. They're both happy. And I'll share this last story. We had one person where he likes to fix things, and he had his own shop where he fixed things and sold them. So when he and his wife are driving up and down the roads, he always sees people throwing out things that he wants to stop and fix them. So we talked, and I said, okay, we'll pick up some of those things. So she did. You know, she at first she was like, I don't want to. It's more trouble. It's more trash. What are we going to do with it? So he started fixing them. Then he wanted to sell them. So we got the neighbors together, and the neighbors came over and they bought the things from him. It made him feel so happy. And then the wife would return the money, and they did whatever they did with whatever he fixed, whether they threw it away or actually kept it. But that wasn't the point. In the hospital, we had a man who only wanted to, the only way we could get him out of bed was he thought he was checking his mail. So we put a mailbox at the nursing station so he would get out. My father at this stage, he likes music. And so contented involvement, I know if I put on music, mine is really short. I'm going to get 30 seconds of him doing this. Not anymore. Last week he had an emergency and he's no longer able to do any of these things. But at one point he would do this and he would tap his foot, and I knew I had about 30 seconds. And so I would quickly go and maybe get his snack together or something. Take him outside. He likes watching the birds. Taking him outside would keep him content and involved for about 15 minutes as he watches the cars pass up and down. He would do that. And so I knew that if I put him outside, I had about 15 minutes to go and do something before he would lose interest and I had to come back. And so again, we're looking at this, and we're looking at this, content and being involved. And then we're looking at this, fitting the task to match their stages and making sure it's something that keeps them content and involved. And even if, and then first we try things that they did or that suits their personality. Then we try things that they didn't do. So fitting the task also can mean that they may not be able to cook the whole meal, but they may just be able to help you wash the vegetables. Great. Mom may need to set the table. That's all she can do. Fill in the dishwasher. Maybe wash 2 dishes and then she loses interest and walks away. That's okay. We just want them to continue to do things. I also do things like get the laundry, give it to them, they fold it, then I put the laundry back in and I mess it all up, and I go around the corner and I come back and I say, can you help me fold the laundry, please? And they're like, okay. And then I give them the laundry again. And so that is exactly what we're trying to do, just content, involved, and fitting the task to fit their stage. So here's a game we're going to play now. Here's your other activity, so we can all wake up. Consider the following sentences. So we're going to your brother's for dinner on Thursday. So in the chat, what is this? Judgment, perception, abstraction? What do you guys think? Abstraction, abstraction, abstraction. Good, good. Are you guys correct? Yes, you guys are. So we would wait till Thursday to talk about dinner at your brother's house. Okay, that's a very concrete example. All right, next one. If we can have hamburger tonight, I won't have to go to the store till the weekend. So what is this? Perception, judgment, abstraction, memory. Before saying if phrase, abstraction. Anyone else have any other thoughts? I'm going with abstraction, judgment. Okay, I see some other ones coming in. It's 3, so we're trying to reason with them, abstraction, and the language we're using. So it would simply be, we're having hamburger tonight. Directive, non-reasoning. Oh, darn. I clicked too fast. I gave you guys the answer. But I'll leave your lunch in the Tupperware in the fridge, eat at noon. That'd be memory and organization. So leave a written note about lunch plus a reminder call. This would work for maybe the early stage. Maybe we're going into the middle. You know, after that, no, we would need to have somebody physically there to prompt them to, you know, to come and eat. And of course, reminders by us. All right, so make the shift. And this is exactly what we already did. It's just another way of looking at the slide. I'm just talking about making the shift. You know, it's the same example. So we are going, it's just another way to look at it. Abstraction, wait until Thursday, very concrete. The hamburger one, just looking at it all in one cycle. instead of it popping up and then leaving your lunch in the Tupperware. So taking the medicine 3 times a day for the next 10 days, that's memory, organization, and judgment. So we need to set up the meds, remind them, call, or get that one I told you that pops open for you. And then, we can't have too much expectations, and we need to take control. Real quickly, we're going to talk about self-care, because we need to manage ourselves. How do we remain calm and in control and manage resources, keep them involved, and keep them happy? And these really are the pinnacles or the backbone of really being a caregiver, whether you're a professional or a family. This is what we're here to do. This is not an exhaustive list. Many of you can add way more to this. And then again, looking at this, that once we start making the shift, we are really going to start moving from that negative, powerless place to the negative, powerful, to the powerful and positive. All right, yay, self-care. So if we were all together, we would stand up and take a pledge together. So I'll take it for all of you guys. And it says that we are going to make a pledge that's starting today, really today. And I will say in clinic, I do have my caregivers say this if they're willing to, that you're going to take care of yourself, that it is not an option. It must be done. It is mandatory. And you need to ask yourself, if you are not taking care of yourself, why? What is stopping you from taking care of yourself? And take those blocks out. And we're all going to say, there's not enough time. I'm tired. I'm stressed out. I'm frustrated. Yes, that is all true. But we can make the time, even if it's 5 minutes. You don't have to start at 15. You can start at 5. 5 minutes if it's just going into the bathroom and locking the door and sitting down against the wall. That's 5 minutes for yourself. And sometimes we've talked a lot about positive stuff, and I will say as a caregiver, sometimes you need those other moments. Sometimes you need to cry, and sometimes you need to scream and yell. I don't mean at the person, although it happens. When it happens, roll it off. So, give yourself a pat on the back. We're doing the best that we can every day. But sometimes we need those moments to cry and to yell and to be angry. And we need to go to the gym and hit the punching bag. And, one of the caregiver moments that we had, they all shared when they get into these moments, the type of music that they listen to changes. Sometimes they need to just put the hoodie over their head and just let all these other emotions of frustration and anger come out. And we need those breaks. And, sometimes it happens in clinic. And if that's happening, that is totally fine with me. And even in the support groups, there's many moments somebody is just having that time in their life, and all of us rally around to support, and we go through it with each other. So just know that a lot of us providers that are here, and when you join our support groups, we're not here just for the good times, we're here for the bad. I'm here for the bad, the in between. If I am your provider, or if I am in some way, I'm here for you, not just now, but for your entire journey. Okay, we're here for the long ride. So that's what stress does, and these are some of the things that you can do to relieve it. It affects all quadrants: your body, your mind, your emotions, your behavior. And really looking at it is finding that balance, which is so much easier said than done, because balance is something that I need to work on in my life too. But somehow, somewhere it gets done. And what I do is I just know my priorities, and my father and my family is my first priority. And so whenever I am, taking a job or doing a job, I make sure that it's understood. And then of course, my patients, the people I'm taking care for, are very much at the top of the list, and will always treat them the same that I treat my father. But we do have to understand when we need to take a break. And so sometimes we have promised that we will not put somebody into a facility. That promise was made at the time when that was possible. And if that promise needs to change, and you're doing what is best for you and your family and the loved one, then that is something, a conversation that needs to happen, and maybe, should happen. There is no right or wrong answers in caregiving. We are doing the best that we can for ourselves and the person that we're caring for. And so whatever you decide to do, you're just doing your best. And that is all that we can do. Here are some policies just to let everybody know that is happening around you at this time on your local level as well as the national level, especially if you've never heard of the BOLD or the HOPE Act. Please look those up. That was specifically put in by federal policies that trickled down to the state to help all of us caregivers. If you have not looked up the Kupuna Caregiver Program or the Kupuna Care Program, which is a local initiative here to help us Please look that up because you can apply through that, and please contact the Elderly Office of Affairs so that you can get started if you've never had any of these services. Long-term care is becoming a very much a necessity now that many people do not have. And know that we are consistently, a lot of us are fighting at the state and the federal levels. I do go with the association to DC for a forum where we do meet with our reps and our senators there to initiate policy, as well as doing the same thing here with our local legislators. And so there are things that we are trying to do to bring more to us and make things easier on us. These are some of our moments in DC and locally here that we have done. We did have some things passed. We did have a proclamation by the mayor. Governor did pass some of the policies. And so these were the fortunate times. Senator Schatz has signed on to join policies, as has Hirono. And then you have Rep. Takayama, who's head of your Kapuna Council, and a lot of the elderly initiatives that go through. So again, focus on the positives, what they still can do, celebrate the successes, celebrate yourself, have fun with being a caregiver, take some time to understand the rewards. This is all to improve our knowledge, skills, and outlook is really what takes us from point A to point B as a caregiver. And then thank you everybody for joining us. That's my father and I. It was a spread that was done for Hawaiian Business Magazine, and I love that photographer. He captured some very great moments with my father. And here are some of the local programs. This is not all that are around here to help you, especially with the Caregiver Foundation. They're very well versed in knowing beyond, like if you need a guardian and what to do with trust and estates and all of that. And then the elder, he will be on, and then the elder law, which will be one of the last sessions. The Savvy Caregiver Program, if you're interested, professional or for a facility or for yourself, please call to join. That's a 6-week program where we dive into a lot of the things here and further. The Dealing with Dementia, I both do. It's a 4-hour class. My staff will be getting both Savvy and Dealing with Dementia, and then Reach trainers who come into your room and work with you one-on-one and use that book to help you get through anything that you're going through. And Kathy and I are both Reach trainers also, besides everything else that we do. So that is it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining.
I have some questions.
Mhm.
I have some questions. Okay. The first one, are there geriatricians on the Big Island?
Yes, there are geriatricians on the Big Island. The best way that you can find them is with your whatever insurance you have. Every insurance company, if you go online under the type of find a doctor, you can input where you are and the list will come up. Your primary care physician primary care provider, excuse me, it's not physician anymore because NPs can be PCPs and specialists also, and they're capable of doing the job. They can provide you with who a geriatrician or make the referral. And then please email me if you can't find one. I'll send you over to Department of Geriatrics and they can help you find one.
Okay. The next question is, we love living in Hawaii and are active in many uniquely Hawaiian pastimes like outrigger, canoeing, hula, ukulele, and some other things I can't pronounce. Anyway, our 2 sons and grandchildren all live in Portland, Oregon. Both of our sons are medical professionals. If one or both of us should have dementia, would you advise us to move to Portland rather than remain in Hawaii? I'm mainly concerned about social isolation if we're remote from our biological family versus the joy we have found living in Hawaii.
I think that is a great question. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you what to do either way. I think that is a conversation that you should start to have with both of your sons at this time, to voice those concerns about how much you love living here and everything you're a part of, and how you feel. Ultimately, I will say, to do what you think will give you the best quality of life in the end. As the disease progresses, you might not be aware it's around you, but what would you want at the end? And if you do want to remain here, then it might be a time to start scouting out adult daycares or facilities that you might be interested in living out the rest of your time, but also to get the paperwork started. So at Lunalilo Home, We do have parents who stay with us and their children live on the mainland and they're the power of attorney. They're in charge of the healthcare decisions. And we keep updates with them. We call them, they call over, you know, we do the Zoom visits with them. And so they're very much still kept in the loop and dictate, you know, what they want with their family members. So it really, really just depends on what you want for your end. And then sharing that with your sons and grandchildren so that they know what you want and they'll make sure that that happens for you.
Okay. How do you get a diagnosis if your PCP does not feel it warrants one?
So that's where the being an advocate comes in. So there's a few things you can really have a discussion. You know, don't let your providers leave without finishing the discussion. Yes, we all have like our 15-minute blocks, but we can make the time. So I would ask them to explain for you why, because sometimes, you know, when we see the person, we that moment you're with them, you are noticing all these changes that something just is right. There's that gut feeling. And so be the advocate and push for it. So have the provider explain to you why they don't think. Why is it just based on what they're hearing? And what is it from what they're hearing and what they perceive dementia to be, or what dementia is? Where is the gap in that? Have them explain to you. Also, you can ask any PCP if they would be willing to do like the MMSE, the mini mental status exam, or the MOCA, which they to see if the person might qualify. So a lot of it is being an advocate. That you can change providers, you can get a second opinion, or you can reach out to a geriatrician yourself if you don't have an HMO. If you have like a PPO plan yourself, you can reach out to a geriatrician on your own and see if they'd be willing to do an evaluation. On that note, one solution is National Task Group. If you go to their website, they do have it's a little bit more exhaustive, but they do have a form that a lot of caregivers use. The National Task Group I should have put on there, one of the great resources too, some of their trainers, and you can actually fill it out and you can compare the changes with your loved one maybe from 5 years ago till now, and that might also be a tool to bring in to show your provider, this has changed, too much has changed. I'm telling you, we need to do something. And I will note that my father, it took us a while. Same thing happened with us, and this is when I was a lot younger. It took us quite a long time to get his diagnosis. So, but I at the end came home and just like fought for it.
If the PCP says mom has vascular dementia without any test, is there questions I should be asking?
No, so a lot of times when we're doing the scans and the blood work, the first thing we're looking for is reversible causes. There is no exact way, although this is changing very soon. We are having blood tests coming. We are being able to use PET scans. The Alzheimer's Association is doing a lot of research. We do have other tools to use now that are helping us to pinpoint. But still at this time, the only way to actually diagnose it is to do a brain autopsy. But for the most part, what we do is, and we covered it last week, is I listen to the person, I listen to you, I run all these tests, we do some imaging, is there any changes? We look at the history, and then all of that total information brings us to the conclusion that the person has dementia. And then the second question, what type of dementia, vascular, Alzheimer's. So what I would say is like go on the Alzheimer's Association, Google vascular dementia, look at it. Do you feel that it fits your parent? If you don't, or you have more questions, get those questions ready and have a telehealth appointment, telephone appointment, or in person, go over those concerns.
There should be cross-professional education on dementia, which we all agree. That was my input. Taking my mom to the dentist the other week was a nightmare from beginning to end. Not even worth the risk, I'm wondering. I was shocked that staff was completely unaware of the stresses being experienced by caregivers during COVID. That was just a statement.
I totally agree with you. And oh, Kathy, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Let's go on to the next question. I was
going to say I agree with you, and it's finding the right person. There is initiative. If you look, I think it's under the Hope Act that there is even a Medicare code that we can use to do things like this with the family education that only 1% of providers use right now. So there's a lot of lack in our community. I will acknowledge that. Saying that, my father had to have surgery, some of his teeth removed. And we actually found one. He was recommended by the doctor, and they didn't have too much training, but I called ahead. I explained how my father was, what was needed, the disease, blah, blah, blah. And it was a pleasant experience, some hiccups, but for the most part, and the oral surgeon was um, pretty understanding. So,
Is having a pet a good idea?
oh yes, a lot of hospices have pet therapy. If your person isn't scared of the pet, by all means. I used to have pet therapy with my father, and now I have. Oh, I brought it. I totally forgot. I brought Buddy. So like you can find him on Amazon, and there's a cat too, and he turns on and he moves around and he barks and he makes sounds. Yeah, so we use this now, or like little baby, or some people like baby dolls. So I ask for donations, like at the home for like dolls, because sometimes they like to hold the dolls and things. So yeah, it's a great idea. Whatever they like and need.
Cool. What do you think about busy quilts to occupy them?
Yeah, if they're able to do it, it'll keep them content, involved, and you fit the task to them. Do it.
Okay. Is there any requirements of those caring for an elderly person to take them to get their immunizations, like the flu shot, when it's available? I guess guidelines would be more likely than requirements.
So as long as a person can still make their own decisional capacity, they can choose to get it or decline. If they can longer do it, if you are if you've been designated or to make the decisions for them, then you would make that call. But we do have guidelines on who can get it, like, the pneumovax, things like that. And your PCP uh, knows the guidelines like the back of their head. And so they would know when it's time for them to get it.
Okay. And the question, I can answer this one. Is anyone checking on how many people are getting COVID-19 in the individual care homes? Yes, they are. And there is a lot of discussion, and Pokiti, you can address this too, by the Department of Health on how to manage this and monitor it as well.
Correct. I don't have too much to add. In fact, HDOH is making phone calls to every single care home and facility to get a sense of. It's a 9-page. It's a long thing. I just had to do mine the other day. They will ask very specific questions about infection control, guidelines, symptom management, and what are you going to do in case it happens or if it has already happened. So they are checking up, and they have just redid the guidelines for care homes for COVID. So yes, they are. I know everybody is worried because we've had some care homes now have outbreaks, but HDOH got in there, and they are trying to. All of us are doing what we need to do at our facilities and at the health centers and at the hospitals to, make sure that we're trying to.
Okay, and the last one, how much can we expect that they have done many times over the years that they will remember and not forget it? And you talked about the gentleman that was a construction guy, and he loved sorting the nuts and bolts and that kind of thing. So
the long term will go last. So just think of you're going back in time. So anything that happened today may be forgotten. And then as the years are going back, so you can talk to them to kind of figure where they are. But if it is something, you're totally correct, that they did over and over and over long term, and it was repetitive since they were maybe small, it'll be one of the last things to fade. Eventually all memory will fade, but it will be one of the last. Like we have a resident who worked night shift, and he was a supervisor. So he likes to stay up at night. So a lot of times the staff wants him to go to bed, but that's not his, that he did it for way too long. So we need to understand that he's going to be up at night. And when he's up, he very much likes to tell the staff, what to do, or the tone of his voice. And that's just because that's what he knows. He did it for, my gosh, since he was a teenager. So 40 plus years. And so, just understanding things like that. Eventually that will fade too, but we're just not there yet.
thank you, Dr. Balaz. I'm going to cut it off now, but I would like to invite you to come back next week for Rick Tabor, and his presentation is called Caring for the Caregiver Mindfulness. And it's a great presentation as well. And it probably will last longer than an hour as well. But so be prepared for that. But it's a lot of great information. Dr. Balaz is amazing. And we've gotten a lot of comments on the chat about they really appreciate everything you've given. And I'm trying to take copies of make copies of the comments for you. But thank you guys so much for joining us. And thank you. There are still 73 of you online. So we really appreciate you sticking around to the end. Have a wonderful day and be safe during the hurricane if we have it. And
Thank
don't hoard.
you.
And don't go to Costco because you can't get in. Have a good day.
Bye,
You too.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.